Hey, this is Julian with Drum and Stage and kicking off the 2025 series of podcasts. Probably going to run this one a few days early. But today we've got Scott Logsdon with us from the Sonar Museum, and we've talked about doing something for quite a while, and we're finally getting around to that. Scott, I want to welcome you, sir.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm glad to be here.
I'm glad to have you. And so, just for the newer guys that weren't around in the days of the message board and when you were keeping everything up to date on the museum, just tell us about the museum and the impact it had on people in the online sonar world.
Well, the Sonar Museum uh, kind of grew organically. As a matter of fact, I didn't really have any idea about it. It happened right about the same time that eBay became a thing. In about 98 or 99, I ended up buying a 1969 Sonar catalog on eBay. And I was playing around with making web pages. So I saw this thing, and I had never even seen a teardrop kit, let alone heard one. But I thought, wow, this is really cool. And so I scanned it and put together the website and was coding pages by hand back then using uh, a text editor. You know, got the little brackets, and the little side thing and all that kind of stuff. Uh, but interestingly enough, within about a month of it coming up, I just went on eBay and started picking up some things and posting them. And all of a sudden, I started getting emails from people around the country and then even across the pond. Hey, I've got a catalog from 72. Do you want a scan of that? Yeah, sure. So they'd send it to me, and the thing just started growing. Then eventually, people were asking me questions like I was some sort of an expert. Uh, Although, as time went on, I ended up learning a whole lot and ended up finding some message board software and put it up there. And it's like, just people came out of the woodwork. There was obviously some sort of a need for this kind of thing, at least I guess amongst the Sonar faithful, at least the ones that knew to call it Sonar and not Sonar. And so it just kind of grew by that. I really didn't have any idea of it being anything other than some sort of a little hobby project. And well, this is fun. I'll learn how to make web pages.
So, from such beginnings, did you ever have any long-term vision for where it would go from there? And if so, did it exceed what you expected?
Well, in the back of my mind when I was doing those original scans, it's like, well, it'd be cool at some point in time, if the people over in Germany were to see this, and say, hey, attaboy, thanks for doing this. Here's a snare drum, or why don't you come have dinner with us or something, in the back of my mind. And not even realizing that, of course, it took several years, but then all of a sudden, I ended up getting a phone call at 9 o'clock in the morning from a certain person in Germany. And I thought it was somebody pranking me, to be quite honest. Let's see, it was in 2007. So, we were already 8 years into it. And the message board had been going on for quite a while. So anyway, not to digress. So, about 9 o'clock in the morning in early January in '07, my phone rings and I answer. Of course, I'm a gigging musician at that point in time, 5, 6 nights a week. So I generally didn't get to bed until 2, 3 o'clock in the morning. And so I answer the phone and I hear on the other, can I speak to Scott, please? And I said, yeah, this is him. He says, this is Karl-Heinz Menzer, the president of the Sonor Drums in Germany. How are you? And in my mind, I'm thinking, yeah, all right. Where's Alan Funt? This has got to be, Candid Camera or something. But we talked for several minutes, and he apologized for the call was long overdue, and that he was glad to make my acquaintance. I had already been to 3 or 4 NAMM shows ahead of time, but I hadn't met him. I'd hung around the Sonar booth, and he's at that point in time all the way up until he retired. was very, very busy. And NAM is not the time really to, hang around and talk to people of consequence when they are busy putting together deals.
Right.
But so he took the time to thank me for putting together the museum. Like the message board, he says, but a lot of the things that are being said on there are just wrong. So, and there again, when you don't get any input from from the mountain, you just kind of make some logical leaps and bounds, and sometimes it doesn't work out. But at that time, he told me, asked me if I was coming to NAM, and I said yes. NAM, for those who don't know, is the National Association of Music Marketers, and they do a large show in Anaheim, in Southern California, in January every year at the Anaheim Convention Center. And those first few years that I went there, it took the entire place, which is like 5 great big rooms. Each one is at least as large as a football field. And there's also rooms upstairs. So he asked me if I was coming, and I said yes. And he said, well, will you be coming early? Because on the Wednesday beforehand, we will be having a little get together at our new warehouse in Corona. And I said, sure, yeah. I generally came out 4 or 5 days early because my parents lived there at the time. So I showed up on Wednesday at the Radisson. He said, come to the Radisson, and there will be a shuttle to take you to our warehouse in Corona, and we'll have a little presentation. It will take 2 hours out of your day, and then you'll be done. Okay? Yes, of course. So I show up at the Radisson at 8:00 in the morning, and I don't see anybody there. Nobody. Place is a ghost town. I'm like, is there more than one Radisson? And I see one very clean-cut, Teutonic-looking gentleman. And I walked up to him and I said, Carl? He says, no, Andy. I said, I'm Scott. Oh, Scott, right this way. So he took me and he sat me down in the lobby. And within 2 minutes, there were like 60 people in there milling around, waiting for the shuttles to show up. When you say a shuttle, you figure, oh, it's going to be one of those little buses. 2 stretch limousines showed up. One was a stretch Lincoln. The other one was a stretch Hummer. So I want to stop it there because the answers from that point on kind of go along with some of the questions you're going to ask later on.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask one we didn't already look at before. When he mentioned the fact that some of the information on the message board was wrong, were there anything specifically that he mentioned that he took exception to?
Well, things like there were arguments back and forth as to what the 3-digit code inside the drum shells meant. And I would get arguments from other people say, "Oh, that's that's a quality control number." No, it's the date, and here's how you read it. And, I was able to effectively reverse engineer that before, but beforehand, the reason that they stopped making the seamless ferromanganese snares, the widespread opinion that was placed on the board was, well, the machine broke down, and so they just decided to stop doing them. And he said, well, that's actually wrong. The reason we stopped making those snares is because we used to buy the steel from a supplier that also supplied to one of the large German automakers. He didn't specify which one, but I'm assuming it was either Mercedes or BMW or Porsche. And he said once that maker stopped ordering, then they couldn't order in the kind of quantities that they needed. The company said, yeah, we'll still sell it to you, but you have to buy like 50 tons. Well, where are they? They hadn't made the equivalent of maybe 3 tons worth from the time they started using it in the early to mid 70s up until the late 90s. And so if they were forced to buy 50 tons, they'd still have 48 tons left
Well,
in storage right now to this day.
a question I would have in response to that is why didn't they use the same machine to make other seamless metal shells?
That's a good question, but of course, that was when that all occurred was after they had been purchased by Honor,
Mm-hmm.
which then was purchased by KHS, or the other way around. I don't know. That's a good question to find out. But by then, the powers that be had decided that they wanted that machine, and so it's in China making horn bells to this day.
Hmm.
But at the same time, lots of laws changed in Germany, mostly for their EPA. Like when I was there, Carl showed me this wonderful filtration system that they installed that cost several $100,000 just to clean up the water, because they used to do all of their plating in house, along with forming the metal into shells and drum hoops. They also chrome plated them in house. Mm-hmm. But the environmental laws changed, and so they ended up having to put in all of this excuse me, all of this filtration equipment in order for the wastewater to meet the new regulations. So they had no sooner finished putting all of that stuff in than the laws changed again, and it was going to cost like another $500,000 or something. And I'm like, why are we doing this? So they ended up not doing the shell production or the plating, just discontinued it right there. So that may not be the answer that you're looking for, but that was the justification that I got from Carl as to why that all kind of came to a screeching halt. Also, it's a lot more. It's more costly to have everything done in Germany than it is to have it done in China. So it's not like they were outsourcing everything to China, but a lot of the stuff that was really not critical, why are we doing it where it's going to cost 5 times more to get it done?
Right. So you mentioned, things being wrong on the message board and all that. It kind of takes me back to another question I had. Mm-hmm. Guys on there, Sonor guys, did I get right the third time? Mm-hmm. Sonor guys, they're fanatical and and loyal. And so what part did that play in how you had to deal with things on the message board, that fanaticism?
Oh boy. And
of course I was there in the middle of it all. So
yeah. But
the
folks that weren't,
yeah.
all of us, myself included, I was very pleased and honored that there became such a following. At one point in time, we had, I think about 1,000 members. Not everybody contributed. There were probably 100 that contributed on a regular basis. But then there were some also, because since this started after, the Link family sold out to Honor, and then Honor was absorbed by KHS. They were a bit upset that they felt that the brand and the pedigree was being diluted by these Chinese interlopers, quote unquote, daring to sell, make them sell things like the Chinese made Force series. And I ended up having to make the point several times to the most vocal. It's like, if you want to take a look, the catalogs are there on the site. If you go back and look, there are already some lower end stuff. Everything wasn't the Signature series, and everything wasn't the Phonic series. After they went from the Champion to the Phonic series, they ended up doing some lower cost brands like the Swingers and the Action and all, and the Ranger, and those were all German made. But eventually they ended up stencil branding stuff from Taiwan. So about 1980, they had a champion set that was suspiciously looked like a CB700 because it was.
Well, the
So it was
international,
nothing new. They're just trying to meet a price point.
right. So tell me about the Sonar International or Sonar International. You got me hypersensitive now about my pronunciation of that name.
Well, I'll tell you, going back to pronunciation. So there were those promotional videos that they put out back in the 90s. And I digitized them and put it on there. So the calm and dulcet tones of the narrator on that, and Sonor, uses only the finest, blah blah blah. Uh, I became friendly with Karl Heinz Menzel, the president of the company, and he calls it Sonor.
Okay.
And he was tutored by the grandson of the founder. So I would venture to say that Horst Link would have corrected him if he was saying it incorrectly. But anyway, I just lost my train of thought. What did you ask me before then?
I don't remember. Well, we'd been talking about the tone of the message board and
yes,
fanaticism
yes,
and
that. Yeah, I'm sorry, I ended up taking this. So there was one guy in particular who, there's no need to name him, you know who he is, who he went by the handle German Sonar only.
Exactly who you're talking.
And it was like they need to make everything the way it was when they were doing the signature series. This is ridiculous. And it's like, they're trying to compete, especially now. They're part of a multinational corporation, so they want to have a wide range of products. And so you can have high end, you can have Rolls Royce, but you also end up having to have the VW Beetle, if you want to be able to get them young and get a hold of them and get them so that they're going to buy the higher end stuff later on. You would hear nothing of this. And and would just get very, very nasty with it. And finally, after giving him several warnings, I just had to boot him off. And then he would just sign up under another under another username and behave himself for a couple of weeks, and then he'd let it slip, and you knew who it was again.
Oh yeah.
So being an admin on that board was not always fruit, candies, and roses.
Yeah. Well, I know you banned more than him. And I know you really fought not to. I know you really didn't want to be, a tyrant. But at the same time, too, you had to have some semblance of order on there, and things could spiral into some odd directions.
There were about 4 or 5 guys who were very, very knowledgeable, but also they were not kind to the newbies coming in and asking questions about such and such. Which should I go buy? What you can afford to get in. You'll even an entry level kit. If you buy a used Sonar Performer kit, you'll notice the quality immediately different than, say, if you bought a Tama Imperial Star. And the both of them would end up costing you about the same as a used kit to begin with. So, but they would end up just browbeating these people. Well, how stupid are you? And there again, I didn't want to end up, losing that knowledge base. But after a while, when you end up, the curmudgeon factor ended up getting to be just way too high. And so I warned them, and I warned them, and I warned them, and I warned them. And then finally it was like, okay, you won't listen, you're out of here. And it resulted in a couple of them starting a competing message board, which is fine. I don't know if it's still out there or not, but it's like if you want to build a community, you have to be patient and be kind to everybody. and kind of let everybody show, and let the ones that need to be shown the door, let them show themselves to the door.
Yeah.
So that's what I tried to do.
Yeah. So what happened to the museum or to the message board part of it?
Well, the message board, basically, because I am just a humble drummer, I'm not an IT professional. Uh, I'm not a tech guy. I'm not a developer. Uh, I ended up, I found this. The board itself went through three different iterations. Each time, because of the board software eventually breaking, or in the middle one, basically being because the company, which turned out to be just a couple of guys in a garage in Louisiana someplace. But the board software would become unusable. They would either not upgrade it so that the server that it was on, the servers end up having to change their operating system on a regular basis for everything. So there's Perl and there's the different kinds of Linux and all the rest of this kind of stuff. And so they go ahead and do it. And if your software, if you're renting space on a server, and your software that you're running on there doesn't work with that's your problem. So that's what happened the first time. And then I ended up, and I couldn't get it. They just didn't upgrade it. So I ended up changing to another software vendor. And the same thing ended up happening. So I ended up, changing the server where it sat to theirs, because I figured, oh, okay, well, if they're going to upgrade their server software, then they're going to keep their software so that it will maintain it. Well, like I say, it was just a couple of guys in a garage who I think were, a couple of teenagers or early 20s dudes, and they just wanted to collect your money. They really didn't care about whether or not the stuff worked or not. Mm. And so eventually I ended up finding, asked around and found this other open source company called PHBB, which I think they're out of like France or Sweden or someplace like that. But they have a large contingency of people there. So I loaded that up there. And keep in mind, each time I had to just restart the board, because they wouldn't all talk to one another. That last one, at the time, it said that they may be able to get it to import the other stuff, but I was never able to get it to do that. And so to make this long-winded explanation short, my after those other guys screwed up and made themselves unwelcome in my mind, I ended up having to move everything, the website and everything, over onto yet another server, who it was basically the same problem, but that the server would end up changing their operating systems and the versions of their stuff. And so the old versions, would work up to a certain point, and then, well, just like any other software, if you have a computer and you're running Photoshop 3, it'll run, on Windows 3.1, but it won't run on Windows 10. Mm-hmm. And it's the same kind of problem. Unfortunately, I was able to follow directions and get it to work for several iterations. And then my pea brain just wouldn't work. And about that time, I had some other business issues that did not allow me to go ahead and just hire somebody. Hey, fix this. Mm-hmm. And so, time just kept marching on, and the functionality of the board kept going down and down and down until it just wouldn't work at all. And so I had the bright idea one time of, well, maybe I can just install the newest version and import the other on there, and wasn't able to get the new install to even work. So at some point in time, and I've been saying this for the last 6 or 7 years now, at some point in time, I'm gonna hire somebody to install that and get this moved over and try and get this thing back up because there is a need for it. You
Well,
know,
for
current
those,
social media is a wonderful thing, but it's not as useful as having that singularly focused message board.
yeah, for those that weren't around for that, you had several main categories, like you had
Mhm.
current production sonar or sonar, excuse me, out of production sonar, and then buy and sell type thing. And within those different categories, you had subcategories. So you could
Mhm.
actually, instead of going in there and having to ask a new question, you could go find where we'd already beat it to death 4 or 5 times before. And you go on one of the pages on Facebook now that are really popular. You just in sequential order, you get to go down and see the
The same
latest.
question being asked 15 times and answered 15 times.
Yeah. So I do
So yeah,
see the.
that's going to be the the main point of being to have the message board back up is to be able to have that point of reference as opposed to having to say yes, the the beach plies in the 70s phonic were 1 millimeter thick a piece, or or whatever it is ad nauseum, to just be
Mhm.
able to say go over here, you know, and it maybe even end up having a frequently asked questions section, or the section for newbies, frequently asked questions for newbies about collector drums or whatever the point may be.
So the static part of the site, when do you anticipate, or do you anticipate bringing that up to date? When do you think?
Yes, I do. There again, I'm when I put the whole thing together, I was, let's see, this is 25 years ago. So I was still in my mid 30s and my brain was a lot less foggy and I had lots of time. Uh, I was a gigging musician, I was full-time gigging. And then in the early 2000s, I had a booking agency business, which was very convenient because the business didn't start until the phone rang.
Mhm.
So that could be 8 o'clock in the morning, or that could be not at all during the day. But so I had plenty of time to sit there and tweak with things and work it all out. Uh, of course, back in those days, you ended up putting the static sites together, uh, to fit whatever size screens were possible. Uh, the mobile devices hadn't even really come online yet. There was Blackberries, but the iPhone and all of the Android devices weren't even a thing yet.
Mhm.
Now, as those started coming out, they have dynamic websites to where it'll just be able to read whatever it is. That's the idea. Of
Mhm.
course, taking something that was put together almost 30 years ago and then converting it is nigh on impossible. Basically, what's going to happen is I'm going to have to start the whole thing from scratch. I'm kind of hoping that with some of the tools that are around today and with AI that I can end up pointing it to this thing and say, all right, I want this particular, splash page so that if you get on your computer, it'll look this way. Make it so that it will look nice on a phone or on a tablet. And hopefully, because otherwise it's going to take years for somebody like me, unless I'm able to get a bunch of teenagers to help me out.
I got kind of the same thing on my mind about some the text
Mm-hmm.
interviews that are on your site that I did. I want to transition those to YouTube, and I want to do them in a way that you don't have to sit there and just read the screen. Uh,
Right,
but I haven't figured out, haven't spent a lot of time looking at options yet, but I want to figure out something that makes sense without some weird voice, being the other guy, Todd
right,
Zuckerman with a voice that's not his just doesn't seem like a
right.
viable way to go.
Well, at the same time, I mean, you've seen. there's many times if you go on YouTube, and I would venture to say at least half of the videos on there, especially if you like watching car videos or news videos or basically anything, it's done with AI voices.
Yeah.
So I would venture to say that you can take the text and put it in and find something that is less obviously AI, because there are some really good ones that you have to that they can go for several minutes before all of a sudden, it says, and then I apostrophe s went to, and so like or when it meant that when the text means hundreds and it says 100s, but it's getting better and better, and just put the caveat in there that this is a an interview that was done 15 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
So you can concentrate on the video portion and just feed it into one of those AI announcers and pick a really good voice.
Yeah.
That would be my recommendation at this point in time.
I think it's a good one.
Other than me learning how these people try to do impressions of these different people's voices for you. And so, Carl, where would it? My ancestors came from Schlesien in the eastern part of Germany.
So, we talked around a little bit about your expectations and all that with the site, but we didn't really dig into much. You got the opportunity to go to Germany. Mm-hmm. Do you want to walk us through how that all went and unfolded?
Okay.
Yeah.
We going back to that phone call that I got from Karl Heinz in January of 2007. He said the call was long overdue, and he wanted to know if I was going to be coming to NAMM and to go to this thing. But at the time, he says, we really appreciate what you have been doing here, and we would like to reward you by inviting you to visit the factory. So at our expense, we'll fly you out and we'll have a hotel for you, and we'll have you out for 3 days. And I was like, wow, this is great. Of course, you have to get a passport. I didn't have a passport, and I didn't know how to get a passport. being somewhat of a Luddite, it's funny being all of a sudden getting involved in this technological based thing, such as putting together the museum and the message board, but not being able to figure out how to get a passport. It took 2 years.
Oh,
and
really?
I even, yeah, until I finally got it done. Yeah. and so he invited me over there. Also with so he invited me out there, but at the same time, at that very meeting, there in 2007, when they took us to the event in Corona, so we hopped into the awaiting limousines, and we were waiting around for probably 10 or 15 minutes for everybody to file down and get in there so that we could go. And so we're sitting in these stretch limousines, and they have long bench seats on either side. And so you're sitting there knee to knee with the person across from you. So, we're trying to kill some time. And so I asked the guy sitting across from me, so what do you do? He says, oh, I'm the Sonor representative and distributor for Great Britain. And you? Oh, I'm the Sonor distributor for South Africa. And I run the distribution center in Australia. So what do you do? And I said, oh, I run this little website called SonorMuseum.com. And they go, oh, you're that guy. I send my customers over there whenever they need a question answered about the old stuff. And so I was just stunned and amazed. That's when it kind of dawned on me that, oh, maybe this thing has a little bit more of a reach than I had really thought about. So we showed up at the venue, which was there was an industrial park in Corona, which is about 20 miles outside of Anaheim. We pull up in front of this, and Carl was there meeting everybody at the door. And so we all filed into this great big room, and there were 3 SQ2 drum sets set up. And as it turned out, it was the grand unveiling party for the SQ2. And so they had these 3 kits set up, and Steve Smith was there, and Jojo Meyer was there, and my brain is leaving me now. He's not an endorser now anymore. He's with DW, but
Dean?
No, German guy, mainly a clinician, but a guy, blast it. It'll come to me 20 minutes from now. But anyway, there were 3 there. And so each got up and did a little demonstration. Steve started off. And so and he probably played for 10 minutes. And then Jojo did the next one. And so we're standing there watching, and I look over, and Steve's standing right next to me. Hi, how you doing? I had met him the year before, in the receiving line for autographs, and we had communicated a few times, and asked him if he was gonna get one. He says, "Yeah, I probably will." So anyhow, that was kind of the start of my being involved with the company, because, well, being involved with, but not with. Mm-hmm. This is where I ended up getting to know, who most of the people were on a first name basis, both in the United States and in Germany. Now I'm getting. You need to redirect me there again, because, like I said, I'm old, and if I digress, then I can't follow the breadcrumbs back.
Well, we were slowly making our way to Germany.
Yes. So very slowly. So in 2009, I finally ended up getting my passport. Carl, over the next 2 years, kept kidding me. I offered him this trip, and he just doesn't want to do it. So I got in touch with him, and so we decided that I could finally get it done in September of 2009. He had me arrange for my transportation, and they took care of it. And I flew over there and flew into Frankfurt. I'd never been out of the United States before in my life, and so went through customs, and so I was trying to find David Schultz, who was their product manager. And I couldn't find him. And so I opened up my phone, and my phone didn't work in Germany. So finally I ended up having to, after walking all over the place trying to find this guy, I ended up having going to with my laptop, went to the information. Could you call this number and see if this guy is around here? And as it turns out, he was only about 75 feet away, and he was around looking around. Thought maybe I'd missed my flight or gotten off in London or something. But so they took me to Bad Berleburg, which is about two and a half hours north of Frankfurt. Windy roads, beautiful countryside. Oh my gosh, I absolutely love it out there. And we had dinner that first night in the hotel, where Carl and I and David got to meet each other, and they introduced me to my favorite German beer, Kronbacher, which will come back later. But so the next day, David ended up taking me to Cologne. So we got on the got in Carl's car. which was a BMW 5 Series turbo diesel. And we got out and we started driving to Cologne, and eventually we were on the Autobahn. And we're just kind of going along, and all of a sudden, whoa! He looked over at me and he started chuckling a little bit. And I'm sure that my fingernail marks are still in that dashboard to this day, because I think at the fastest we were doing about 255 kilometers per hour, which is about 160.
Oh, wow.
It was crazy. It was crazy. But so I guess that's the introduction they end up giving to most of the newbies. Let them know how the Autobahn is. We went to Cologne, went to a lovely. First of all, we ended up going to the Cologne Cathedral, which it's a Gothic cathedral they started building it in 1100, and they didn't finish building it until the 1800s.
Oh, I can't even imagine.
And I mean, just supposedly the point for being of the place is that it has some of the relics of the three wise men, the Magi. But just utterly amazing. So we ended up coming back from there, and the next day is when Carl took me on my tour through the factory. And that time of year, everybody is on holiday, so I didn't get to see many of the people working. There were a few that were there working, but so he took me through the factory and showed me, how the shells were made, what sort of the veneers, everything. Just him and I, one-on-one. Not too many people get to have that kind of experience. It was very nice, very, very nice. And then let's see, the next day we ended up having some business meetings where they wanted to see if I would be willing to to advertise or cover more of the current Sonor product line, which of course I said yes. And so they loaded me up with some of the stuff, and we started doing that as well. So then fast forward to January, I guess maybe about December, I got a phone call from Carl saying, "Are you going to be going to NAMM?" Yeah. Says, okay. I'm working on something right now. I'll let you know when I see you in January. And so he ended up asking me when I got to January. He says, "Are you going to be busy in the beginning of April?" No. Well, would you be willing to come to Germany and work at the trade show at the vintage trade show? I'm like, yes. And so that year they flew me over to Germany, and I ended up manning the booth at the Music Messe in Frankfurt, where we had all of the stuff out of the SonorMuseum, the actual museum at Sonor. They took it over there, and people came by, and I explained to them about the history of Sonor and showed them the things, and it was pretty crazy.
Wow, sounds like it.
Yeah, yeah.
So where did the snare drum come into play that they hooked you up with?
He ended up asking me what I wanted. They wanted to pay me for coming out there, and I'm, in my mind, I'm like, pay me? Are you crazy? You're gonna fly me out there? You put me up in a hotel? You're feeding and beering me? I'll do it for that. So I just, oh, whatever. And so the final night, the trade show lasted for 4 days. I think it went Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And so on Saturday afternoon, we got done, and they piled several people into a bus and took us back to Bad Berleburg, where everybody lives. Berleburg is maybe about 10 miles from where the factory is, but it's the county seat, so to speak. And that's where all of the hotel rooms are. So we ended up having some meetings. On the bus, there were also other distributors. That particular time, there was a guy from South. There were three people from South Africa. There were a couple of Brits in there. There were two Chinese guys. There were a couple of Australians. And the next day, when we had our meetings at the factory, there were some people from Brazil. So counting me, there were representatives from every continent at that meeting, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah.
And all of those folks were very, very, very nice. So it was either that night or the night afterward. I think it was that night. We ended up having a big dinner at one of the local restaurants with everybody, and there they ended up thanking me for working the trade show and all that, and brought out this snare drum as a gift. Amazing. And I was just absolutely blown away. It's got a special tag here, which I don't know if you can read that, but I'll go ahead and read it. It says, thank you, Scott Logsdon, Sonor Vintage Show, Frankfurt 2011. It's crazy. Just crazy.
Well, your dreams came true. You said,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
In the back of my mind, it was like, well, maybe they'll, and sure enough. And, I'm still in contact with most of the higher ups that were there in those days have since retired. Right. Karl Heinz retired a couple years ago, and I don't know about Andy. But some of my other friends, one of the product guys, a guy by the name of Torsten Schmidt, is still there, and we're friends on Facebook. Several others, have left and gone on to other things. My friend David, who took me to the Cologne Cathedral, ended up taking a job with Sonor down in southern Germany at the harmonica factory. It was funny with him was that unfortunately he came to America the first couple of times I met him. He was at NAMM, and then he just stopped coming because unfortunately for him, he had the same name and birth date as a known terrorist. Oh, no. And so every time he ended up coming to customs, he ended up getting stopped. He ended up getting frisked. The whole 9 yards. It got to the point where Carl and the rest of the people they sent him. They would get him a solo flight out because they didn't want to have to deal with all of that. So eventually and it's too bad. He is a sweet guy. My wife loved him. He young, very good looking blonde gentleman. My wife said, he could be our kid. So anyhow, there I digress. That's Germany. I love it. I could live there. I can't wait to go back.
So with everything changed over the years at Sonor, what do you think of the current production gear and all that?
Well, the SQ2, all of the German-made stuff it's the German-made stuff. There's never been any change. Myself, I haven't played an SQ2 kit. I own some designer pieces. I own two SQ2 snares, and I've watched them be put together. Mm-hmm. The quality control is surpassed by nobody. As a matter of fact, the last time I was out there, let me shut the door. The dog is making noise. But the last time I was there and took a factory tour, we had I was with a large group, and we were going by the stage where they polish the shells after they've been painted and everything. So they had two people there that their only job is to take those lacquer finishes and polish them to mirror perfection. And then they set them down on the ground on these strips of wood, next to them while they do the next one. And somebody in our group ended up brushing against one of the shells with their shoe. Now, any of us looking at it, you wouldn't be able to tell, but apparently there was just this absolute microscopic little place. And of course, the polisher was not happy, but he took it and he ended up polishing that whole shell all over again because it had to be perfect. And that's pretty much the way it is with the SQ2s. I mean, like I say, I have two of them, and I have no complaints whatsoever. I mean, it is just perfection. I could show you here is my current go-to snare. This guy right here, which is a 13 by 6.5 SQ2 with the beech thin, the veneer inside and out. It plays like butter. It feels, like when you shut a door on a Mercedes-Benz, it goes. When you shut a door on a Chevy, it goes clang, clang, clang. Well, that's kind of the difference with these. When you play this, it goes boom. And when you play other inferior brands, they go clang, 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 as far as I'm concerned. The thing about the SQ2, as you know, is that it is totally custom. Every aspect of it is built to the specification of the buyer. But of course, that's another reason why they are as expensive as they are. So then you have the SQ1s, the Pro Lights, the other German-made versions, where it's the same attention to detail, but they have limited finishes, limited sizes. The options aren't there like they are with the SQ2s, right, so that they can crank them out, and that helps keep the cost down. But the quality of all of them is just it's top notch. I can't complain at all.
So do you have anything you hope to see come about product wise for the 150th anniversary? Do you know anything? I'm not going to ask you what it is, but do you have any inside information?
I have a little bit of an inclination of a couple of things that I'm sworn to be quiet. I have an NDA in process with this, so we have to just say there will be some interesting and exciting things. Okay. As far as products go, I don't anticipate it. One of the things that I have brought up several times in the past is the professional line lightweight hardware. I ended up buying some DW 6000 series flat base stands just because of the weight. And the tubes are made of chrome plated steel, but the legs are polished aluminum. And then here, most recently, I ended up buying some Yamaha Crosstown series, which they're entirely made out of aluminum. And I mean, if Steve Jordan is taking them out to play with the Rolling Stones, I'd say that they're capable of handling things. So I would really like to see Sonor do something along those lines. Whether or not that ends up coming to pass, I don't know. I've been making that subtle suggestion for the last 15 years.
Yeah. I would like to see that myself because I had Yamaha Crosstown as well,
Mhm.
and any concerns I had about it being stable or whatever. I mean, it stays where it's supposed to be. I mean, I'm not a thrash metal drummer or anything, but I'm a pretty heavy-handed guy, at times, and it was adequate, and then
Yeah.
some. So I'm with you. I'd like to see, and then once you've gotten spoiled on that sort of gear, it's just kind of hard to want to go back to, a 200-pound bag of metal.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And but getting back to well, as far as playing and performance, a lot of folks that I interact with on these Facebook groups and such, they say, "Oh, it doesn't, it's the player, it's not the equipment." Yes, this is true, but if when you're playing that particular instrument and it sounds like $1 million to you, I don't care. You're going to play better.
Mm-hmm.
I
Oh,
mean, I've played several other brands. I've played DWs, I've played Pearls, I've played Tamas, and for me, Sonor is just it. Just because I like the way it sounds, it's easier to draw the sound out of it, and when you hit it, it's just that Mercedes analogy again. It just feels substantial. And well, for example, when I go to set up my equipment, even on my older stuff, uh, you pull it out and it hardly ever really needs to be tuned. There might be, one or two lugs that are just a little bit out.
mm-hmm.
And it's been sitting, in the case for 2 weeks where the temperature has gone up and down and it still holds tune. And that I haven't found that to be the case with others either.
Yep. Yep. We share a passion for Sonor for sure. And of course, there's a lot of folks out there that do. So, do you have any closing thoughts here? Is there anything we've missed, or?
Well, it always interests me as to what got people into Sonor to begin with.
Yeah.
Um, for me, it happened completely by accident. I started playing drums when I was 12 years old because my stepfather was a drummer. And I came home from school and he had a 1965 Ludwig Super Classic set up in the spare room with a stereo and the headphones and the record player. And so I would come home from school, from junior high, and nobody was home. So I went in and I bashed away on them uh, with the headphones for a couple hours before anybody got home. I thought I was getting away with something. And to make a long story short, I ended up playing those drums for the next until the mid 1980s. I ended up with them after my mom and my stepfather got divorced.
Hmm.
So about 1985 or 1986, I can't remember. A drummer who I knew around town here in Parkersburg, West Virginia, he got a hold of me and he says, "Hey man, you want to buy my drums?" Well, I didn't have any money or anything. He said, "Hey man, I'm moving to Nashville. I want to become a session player, but I need to sell these drums." So he had a set of white Phonic Plus, 12, 13, 14, 16-inch floor tom, a 24-inch bass drum, and a Gretsch snare. But and I said, "I can't. How much do you need?" He says, "I'll sell you the whole thing for $1,500." Now, the bass player that I work with now, and I worked with him back then, told me, "Oh my God, he had been on the road with this guy for years, and this guy was starving himself, to buy these drums piece by piece, saving up, buying a Happy Meal instead of feeding himself correctly, so that he could buy these drums." He ended up spending like $4,500 or $5,000 to put this kit together. So he's selling it to me with hardware, with cymbals, with cases for $1,500. Sold. So the first time I sat him up and played them, it was that whole Mercedes thing again. Are you there? Are you there, Jules?
I am.
Oh, okay. I can't see you. There you are.
Yeah. Went into phantom mode.
It was the same thing. Set those things up and played them, and I was instantly in love with them. And so I've always been, and it's been that way ever since. I've bought several kits. I've probably had 20 different Sonor kits since then. I bought a couple other kits in the meantime, and never kept them for more than a couple of months. And it's just, that's the way it is. So I mean, even now, I'm what I play with nowadays is if it's a dive bar, I take out my 3007s. If it's a place where I feel safe, I take out my Force 3000s. And what can I say? I'm going to play them forever.
Yep. I can dig it. I wanted Sonor for years before I got one, and in '93 we had a local dealer in Albany that started carrying them, and I was going to order a Scandi Birch 3000 snare drum, and wound up switching the order to the D500 reissue because it came out in the time I was putting together the money. I did a layaway, and they were going to let me pay for it and then order it. So, having played acrylites and all that, and some chrome Ludwigs, I'm thinking I'm getting about the same thing. Well, that D500 reissue with the Hella Hoops comes in, and there's no comparison between that drum and a Ludwig. There just is not.
No,
And
no, absolutely not.
and I didn't really get how big of a difference there was until I was on a gig one time. We were playing, it was a Christmas party, and about this time of year. And this would have been about, I think, in '93. And we played for the good times. So we're playing really soft and all that. And then a guy kicks off old time rock and roll. Buddy, when I came in with that flam, I kid you not, the lead singer doubled over and Danny hit a wrong chord. I had a recording of that for years. I don't know whatever happened. It was on a cassette tape, but she literally ducked over. I mean, and I realized then that now something's different here. This is not what I'm used to. And
Yeah, out of nostalgia, I have a 5x14 Supra and an acrolite. The acrolite's over here on the shelf behind me. And every once in a while I'll play them, but it's like it's just if you know, you know. And
right.
I know that those are fine snares. They're on recordings everywhere. I mean, 402 was good enough for Bonzo. It ought to be good enough for everyone else. And I'll give it to you. But Bonzo, I'll bet you if Bonzo had played a D506 with Hella Hoops on it,
Mm-hmm.
that would have been his go-to.
But hey, what if we all liked the same thing? What if there was just no diversity whatsoever and it was just one size fits all? And boy, what a boring world that would
Yes,
be.
it would be a very boring world.
And then you wouldn't have the opportunity to have better drum gear than your neighbors. So hey.
Yeah, this is right. This is absolutely right.
Well, Scott, I'm going to need to wrap this thing up. I got some stuff going on my end. We still have a minute or two left. If you had anything else you wanted to touch on or bring us up to speed on.
Well, here, well, I would venture to say, we did kind of touch on it, but as soon as I am able to figure out, because it's all old guy stuff now, but from the technological standpoint, the website is coming back. The message board is coming back. It's just a matter of old guys who have a hard time figuring out how to use a phone anymore being able to figure out how to use it. For those who don't know, it ended up taking probably 10 minutes for me to figure out how to get my microphone to work for us to do this interview. So keeping that in mind, but it's too valuable a resource to just let it sit fallow, in my humble opinion, and in the opinion of a lot of people who've talked to me about it over the years. So we do have an active Facebook page called the original SonorMuseum.com on Facebook. And so in conjunction with that, there will also, I'm putting together a YouTube channel so that here in the future, I'm going to be doing some interviews like this. We'll probably do a reverse interview where I can be the host.
I would love that.
But also, I'm planning on talking to others in the collector community, and hopefully with some of the other folks that they're here stateside and in Germany, involved with the company directly, so that we can get to know them and go on getting to share our love of Sonor drums and percussion.